Let's get to our star this evening, Will Alexander. He set the record as the youngest handler in Canada to achieve #1 dog all breeds. That's a pretty big accomplishment. He's one out of only 5 handlers who've shown more than 1 top dog all breeds in Canada. He was the handler of the 2015 Best in Show winner, Beagle Miss P. And he is also an avid teacher and entrepreneur. Will has many, many different businesses that maybe we'll get a chance to tell you about all of the amazing things he has to offer. But for right now, I would like to just start by learning a little bit more about Will. So hello, Will.
Hi, everybody. How is everybody tonight? Good to see you all there.
I would love to know how you got started in showing dogs.
Well, my parents bred Irish setters, and we bought our first Irish setter. I was about 5, I think, when we bought our first Irish setter, and she wasn't very good quality, but she was passable. And we started going to shows, and she was getting hammered. She couldn't win anything. So we actually ended up buying a dog out of the newspaper, and he was advertised as half a champion. And we bought him, and he was this big, hairy red dog, and we had a professional handler groom him for us, but my dad showed him. And his very first show, he won the group first from the classes. And there was about 40 Irish setters in the breed ring that day. And my dad got a picture. And the next day, he went 4th in the open dog class, and he got a picture again. So he didn't know what he was doing. But after that, it just evolved from there. I started watching dogs, and I had a few heroes growing up. George Alston and Brian Taylor were both very prominent Irish setter handlers. And that's how I got the bug, really. I got to watch George, and whenever I was in the States, I watched George. And whenever I was at home, I watched Brian Taylor, and I thought they were rock stars as far as I was concerned. I saw them, they had the most beautiful dogs. In my eyes, back then, Irish setters were the most beautiful dogs. So I started at that level, and my parents got to know a lot of the very big breeders. And there was a very famous breeder in Middleburg, Virginia, named Ted Eldridge. Travelled Irish setters. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that anymore. They're long gone, but they were very famous Irish setters. When I was about, I guess around 10, I went to visit Mr. Eldridge with my parents to look at a dog, and they ended up giving me an English cocker that Mrs. Eldridge bred. And after that, I started visiting them every year. I would go every year to Middleburg, Virginia, and I would do what's the specialty? It was the Potomac Irish Setter specialty in Virginia, and Old Dominion was my favorite show. I was the Cherry Blossom Circuit with Mr. Eldridge, and Mr. Eldridge's handlers back then were Mike Billings and George Alston. So I got to see I met Mike and Janie and Bob and Ted Young when I was like 10 years old. I met them at a Professional Handlers Association party with Mr. Eldridge, and I didn't know any of them except for George. So, but I think back now, and I got to meet some of the real icons of the sport when I was that age. So I went from there, and I showed dogs in Canada, and then I worked for handlers starting around 16 or 17. I worked for a handler named Gary McDonald. I worked for Brian Taylor, and I worked for Bobby Stebbins down there. And I hung out I bothered George all the time. I called him all the time, and I'm sure he was very nice about it. But I'm sure in his inside voice he was saying, "What is this crazy Canadian kid doing?" But he would answer any question I had, and he still does. I talked to him last week. He still answers questions I have, and he's the one that actually taught me to teach people how to show dogs. I would go to his seminars, and he would teach me how to be a teacher. And it went from there. I went on my own probably in 1986. I went on my own because my boss at that point, Gary McDonald, he passed away tragically in a house fire. So the next weekend I was the handler. I had to show the dogs. And it went from there. We showed an Irish setter named Impresario in 87, and he was top dog all breed, and I was 22 years old at that point. And it just kept coming from there. It seemed almost like it was written down somewhere. My career just kept catapulting till I ended up going to Best in Show at Westminster. And then after that, I kind of slowed down a bit and showed some dogs and started actually leaning more towards the teaching of it. So I enjoy teaching.
That's amazing.
That's Cole's notes.
Wow. I mean, 22. I mean, a lot of people are just starting to have the dream.
I know, it's crazy. I think back now, I have a 27-year-old son, and I think he's really mature. But when I was 22, I already had I was at 23, I had a mortgage, and this was crazy. You know, I couldn't believe how fast things went.
So what do you attribute to your success, to being so successful? And, you know, in all fairness, you could have been a one-hit wonder, but you've done it 5 times.
Yeah, I was top dog all breed 4 or 5 times. I forget. Yeah, 4 times. 3 Irish setters in an Afghan.
Okay.
Yeah, and all the Irish setters, actually the final Irish setter, his name was Piper, DeWitt's great one. He was grandsired by the other 2 Irish setters who were top dog all breed that I showed. So, and he won 101 Best in Shows. His one was in Detroit, Cobo Hall. So he was a pretty fun dog.
So you're actually going to tell these kids that it was just luck? You just happened to be in the right place in the right time? Is that what you're going to say?
I think timing does have a lot to do with it, because I met the right people, and I was like a sponge. I don't know, Kelly, do you remember Garrett Lambert?
No, I don't.
Now, Garrett was a very successful handler here in Canada. He worked for Bill Trainer, and he came up here and he settled down up here, obviously. And I used to bug him to no end. I would call him all hours asking him questions. And I think that was my secret, was I just was like a sponge, and you'd go into my grooming room and there would be pictures of all these famous dogs, and I would draw on them as to where I wanted to trim them or where I would change things. And I would call George up and I'd say, how did you do this? How did you do that? And I just always spun. We had bench shows in Canada. And I don't know if you guys know what bench shows are. Bench shows, you have to arrive, not you, Kelly. You guys have to arrive at a certain time. You can't leave until, I think we couldn't leave till after bench show at 7 o'clock each day. And we had a week straight of those shows. And we would have, there was a sportsman show in Canada. And Peter Green would be there, Bobby Barlow would be there, Tommy Glasser would be there, George Ward would be there. And these guys couldn't go anywhere, so they just stood around talking. And I was the little guy wandering around listening to them all and bugging them all. So I got to know them all when I was a little kid.
So I'm going to say the Cliff Note version for the juniors here are, it's okay to pester handlers, ask lots of questions, be eager to learn, be persistent. Yeah. And then also aligning yourself with good, knowledgeable people, because you had great people guiding you. In many ways, you were lucky you fell into it, but there are people that could be in that position and not have taken advantage of it, and you really
no question.
Capitalized on those great influences.
I think it was because it's what I always wanted to do. Like I think when I did retire a couple of years ago because I had a bad hip, and I'm actually come back to show a few dogs. But someone asked me, what kept me going, and it was I just wanted to get better and better all the time. Even when I was in my 40s, I would see somebody and think, and I would ask them the question. It was just nonstop questions over and over again. And I always considered myself, I was interviewed one time, and I considered myself the luckiest person I was around, because when I was 10, I wanted to be a professional handler. So when I grew up, I was a professional handler. So I got to do what I wanted to do. Like some people want to be astronauts and be baseball players, and they don't achieve it. And I got to do what I wanted to do.
So speaking of living the dream, can you maybe describe for us the day that you showed Miss P, like approaching Westminster? What were your thoughts coming into Westminster? What was it like in the breed, in the group? And then, maybe even Best in Show, if you could just tell us that story, because, there's so much that goes into that win.
Oh, for sure. Well, she was the first dog I ever campaigned in America. I had shown up for circuits and then gone home, but she was the first dog I ever showed all year long. And she ended up top hound, and she won what I guess they don't call it the Quaker Oats anymore. They forget what they call it now. So it was a very exciting year, and Westminster was going to be your last show, no matter what. And coming up to it, any of those big shows where you think you have a chance to do well, things always start to go wrong, or you overthink things. And one day I remember I was coming, we had the specialties, the setter specialties right before the garden. And I had Miss P with me because she never left never left my side basically. But she was lame for 2 days, 3 days before the garden. I couldn't get her sound. She was so reckless, and she would play with the big dogs that she always hurt her shoulder. And I was freaking out. So by the time the garden came, I had my girls that were working for it. They would carry her in lots of crate time. And she was so used to a regimented exercise that she was getting pent up where she was not herself, because she's usually, even at dog shows, I would walk her forever, or the girls would walk her just to stretch her out. And she was not getting that because I was so worried about her shoulder. But the shoulder was fine, and she the day before the garden, she seemed fine. But I was still panicking. Everybody at the Irish Setter Specialties were all trying to talk me off a ledge, so to speak. And then the day of the garden, I took her in the breed ring, and it was Alan Odom was doing it. And she was showing pretty well, but Alan had never really done much for her. So I wasn't really convinced about the breed. And actually, Alan put a dog ahead of her and was about to take them around and say best of variety. And he changed his mind and said, I want to see these two go around together by themselves again. And then she ended up being victorious. But she was this close to losing the breed that year. Like I would thought we were losing. When he said, put this bitch up front, let's have the class round. I thought, well, that's it. Pack your stuff, guys. Let's go home. So, and then we had Betty Ann was doing the group, and she had always been a big fan, but I hadn't shown to her a lot, so I wasn't sure, because the Bloodhound was very popular that year as well, and she had done well for that dog, and he'd gone back and forth. When we won that group, Adam Bernardin, who was my assistant for 8 years, he was so excited, and we just talked. I used to always say to him, no mistakes, no mistakes. Make sure if you're going to make a mistake, make it in your head. So I always made my assistants or my students replay or play out the class in their head before they go in the class themselves. And I always said, if you're going to make a mistake, make it in your head. So when you walk in the ring, you've already made the mistake, you're not going to make it. So all day long, Adam was saying, no mistakes, no mistakes, no mistakes. And we were in the holding area for Best in Show. And I missed a story. After the group win, I was walking into where they interview after the group, and Sue Forsyth yelled at me, and she said I had to call Mom. And so I called Janie, and she yelled at me and told me I went too fast down the back. And then George, the same thing. George called me and told me that I wasn't thinking on my feet and I was going too fast. So they were probably right. When I watched the video, I think, oh yeah, maybe I did hurry myself a little much. But then the next day, I told Adam, I said, no mistakes. We worked on no mistakes, and it just seemed to work out for us. I slowed myself down in my head. George always taught me to think in slow motion when I was in the ring, to go half speed, and it really does work. It really, if you take your speed and cut it in half, because of your adrenaline, it's probably the right speed. So that's what I've always done. That's what I've always taught too.
That's interesting. I mean, really interesting lessons there. I love the idea of practicing it in your head. So by the time you get in the ring, it's not your first time. You've done it over and over and over, and there's almost a pattern now that's been established. So
you know how much driving we do, Kelly, and I would do that when I was driving. I would play out classes in my head while I was driving. And I remember the first national with Beagles I ever won was 1992, and I remember winning that national driving home from a dog show in Canada because I played it out in my head. What I was going to do. And it just seemed to work out for her.
Well, and and I love that, here 20 years, maybe 30 years after you started, you're still practicing in your head.
Oh yeah.
It's you don't get to a certain place in this world and you just become complacent and you don't have to keep working. You become
complacent, someone's going to beat you. And I always tell people when I teach my classes that even as owner handlers, when you walk in that ring, the professional handlers are not going to let you in. So you cannot make a mistake. You have to go out there, and they're hoping you're going to make a mistake, because that's when they have it on you, in so to speak. And it's not just professional handlers. Really good breeder owner handlers are the same way. So when you're in there as a owner handler, brand new, even a junior handler, I always tell my students, watch everybody in your ring, watch what they do, watch so you know what they're doing and see what mistakes they're doing or what mistakes they're not doing. So you have a blueprint when it's your turn up there. So you find, I see so many people that will sit and be chatting during the whole class. And I think you lose part of that edge if you're chatting and you miss things. You know, you really do. It's amazing what you miss when you're chatting, and even to the point of just how some judges seem to like you to bring the dog back to them. Some like the side, some like the front. They're not going to tell you most of the time, so you need to watch and find out what they want. I used to always make a point of going to class before, so I had an idea of what they wanted as well. So
yeah, that's great advice.
Forewarned is forearmed, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes. Yes, well, I like to be very prepared too, so I can have a bit of a neurotic mind, but you know, all my ducks in a row, and I am capable of improvising, but if I don't have to, I want to plan.
Oh, exactly.
So what was it like after winning? You see the Westminster winner, they have to go on all these TV shows. How did that feel, like being this dog handler to now you're on national TV? What was that like?
It was exhausting. Like I made Adam come with me because I was so tired, because they made us stay at the after show party till like 2 o'clock in the morning. And then they met us at the hotel at like 4:30, 5 o'clock to make all those morning shows. So I was exhausted. And so Adam came with me he looked after P while they interviewed me. And actually at one point I went down the truck and had a nap because I was so tired. But it was something I never forget. But to tell you honestly, I do forget some of the shows. I've had to go back to YouTube and watch some of them to see where we were. And I've only ever watched the garden tape itself, the whole entirety, once. So,
wow.
Yeah, I don't like watching myself.
Well, maybe someday you'll want to do that. You know, right now you're probably still winding down, because being the life of a handler is quite the adrenaline rush. There's not much downtime, which actually leads me into my next question. You know, being an all breed handler, can you tell me about the life of an all breed handler and what your life looked like when you were campaigning a top dog? Like, what were your weekdays like? What was the weekend like?
Oh, and you got to remember, everybody, that these are animals, and they don't get a day off. Like you are with them all the time. And I had girls work me and staff and whatnot, but I tried to use Mondays as the day I got back to everybody. Other than that, we were working with the dogs every day. And when you're campaigning a dog, you probably know too, Kelly, you start to think too far ahead, and you overthink things, and you worry about, you feel like you have to keep winning and keep winning and keep winning. And it's true. Like when people have a lot invested in the dog and you, so you've got to do the very best you can. So you are almost overthinking where you're going and what you're doing. And we were very regimented. I felt that structure was the best thing for the dogs and for the staff. If they had certain days where they had to, I had 3 staff members at the kennel that were on the road with me. And I would always have one. They didn't have to do the same job over and over again. So one day, one would treadmill the dogs. The other one would be doing, if they were in bands, redoing bands and redoing washing out pee furnishings. And the other one would be doing more maintenance. Then they would all switch the next day, just so that they didn't get in a rut. And it worked out well, because I found that they never got bored of what they were doing. And they were great too. Like they were, I don't know how, they were tireless, it seemed. Like I had some very good assistants. Even young Adam would work until he dropped. Like it was, I had some really good kids.
So at what age or what experience level would you be willing to start working with a junior? What are your expectations, and when are you open to
Well,
starting
usually,
them?
yeah, usually 16 was the age I started them at, but there were some that just started hanging around the setup when they were younger, like Ashley Martins and Jordan, and there were other girls that would just come in and start sweeping up and tidying up, and then they eventually just became part of the team. They did it all themselves too. Like I never asked them to come and do it. They came and asked me if they could do it, and I think that's such a great initiative, you know. And Adam came to me when he was 14. He was having issues at home, and he came and lived with me, and I knew his sister very well, and he came and lived with me and went to school, and I made sure he went to school, and he almost became my adopted son. And he was nonstop working. Now he made mistakes, like he would overwork sometimes and overthink things, and he'd make mistakes. And I remember coming home one time and getting a call that I was at a restaurant because I'd stopped to have dinner, and I got a call saying that my beagle and my smooth fox terrier were loose somewhere, and I lived in the woods at that point. And I got home, and there was snow was I had like at least 3 feet of snow, and I could tell that there were tracks all the way around the house. These two dogs had circled the house, and Adam hadn't noticed because he was eating pizza and playing video games or something. I just went outside and I banged 2 dishes together, and when a beagle's loose and they hear dishes being banged together, they tend to head towards the dishes, and the smooth just followed. And it was the beagle bitch I just won the Brie of the Garden with that year. So that was probably March of 95 or so, around there. No, maybe it was after that, because Adam came in 98. So it was definitely after that. So it was probably 2002, that bitch, Jody bitch. Yeah. So yeah, she'd won the Brie of the Garden, and I get a message that she's loose on the property somewhere.
Yeah, that's pretty scary.
Yeah,
pretty
it is. Your stomach kind of drops.
Now, if a junior came to work for you, when someone first starts working for you, what are their job roles?
Oh, we start off slow. They start off with Xing the dogs and cleaning up and putting away cleaning up the setup and putting away the tools and putting things like that, and running rings, letting me know what's happening in the rings. When they become full-time, that's when they start to progress. I start teaching them how to groom dogs when I start seeing that they have the initiative, that they want to do it. They usually tell me. It was funny. I keep bugging on Adam, but Adam was stuck to my shoulder when I was trimming dogs, almost to the point I had to tell him to back off. But he was, so I had my washer and dryer were in my grooming room. So everybody sat on the washer and dryer while I trimmed, and I would yell and tell them what I was doing, and blah, blah, blah. Showing dogs in Canada, we have a bit of an edge because we're allowed to practice in rings in Canada. So every morning I would take the kids into the ring, and they would work with a different dog. Because I always said, what if I get stuck and you have to go in the Bouvier ring, or you have to go in this ring? You need to know how to show them. I don't want you just walking in there and hoping for the best. I always try to teach things. When you do something, do it on purpose. Like when I watch people bait dogs and they come in and they hope it works, I said, I don't want you to hope it works. I want you to make it work. So do it on purpose. And that's how I would do this every morning with them. And sometimes after the show too, if they were still wanting to do it, but usually mornings, because we would get there at 5:36. And then once things were settled, if we had time before the morning rush, we'd go and do 10 minutes in the ring. I think it really helped, you know, with the dogs as well. Like we had some dogs that weren't being shown yet that I would play dog show with 6 months before they were being shown. And it really helped.
And do you think this make it happen? Do you think that that's a mindset that, you know, just a level of like all your energy and conviction is in that's what makes the difference?
I want things to be, like I said, if you're gonna do something, do it on purpose. I don't want you just to fumble into it. I want you to, if you're not sure about it, ask me about it. But I want, when you walk into that ring, I want you to pick your spot where you're setting your dog up. I want you to pick that piece of property on purpose. not necessarily because you're trapped in the corner, but this is your piece for the next 30 seconds while the judge walks by your dog, even when the initial stop. And George always taught me that you as soon as you walked in that ring, you had to have eyes in the back of your head. You had to see everything that was happening. And he wanted you to do things on purpose. If he saw me waltz into the ring like I had no care in the world, he would ream me out, trust me. So you had to walk in there like you were supposed to be the one that was going to win that class. So,
and what if you don't feel that way? How do you, like if you're a shy kid or lacking in confidence, how do you?
Yeah, well, we all get, like, I think I started off as a shy kid. I think you just gain confidence by, I think dog shows are a great environment for that type of thing because we accept anyone, and shy kids can ask questions of anybody. You remember, dog shows are the only sport where for the price of an entry fee, you can compete with a professional. It's the only place in the world you can. You can't do it in golf. You can't do it in hockey. You can't do it in tennis. You're right there with a professional. So you use them to your advantage, ask them questions. And I always when you chose a mentor, I had a book that I wrote, and I called that section "Standing on the Shoulders of Giants." And when you pick that person, make sure they have big shoulders and pick the right mentor. A lot of people will want to be your mentor, but you choose your mentor. You choose who's right for you. And choose one that has big shoulders, because they've got 30 years experience and the person they learn from has 30 years experience, and so on and so on. So you choose the right mentor, you've got 100 years of experience right in that person. It's important to think these things through.
Well, and I like that suggestion as well, because someone that resonates with you, that you feel like you can relate to, because there are a lot of great handlers out there, but you need to have one that you feel comfortable with.
Exactly. And you get along with. You don't necessarily, I think you want to be friends, but I've had some assistants that we weren't that close, but they were great assistants. They were such good students, but after they left, we never really socialized. I have some that never leave me, but.
So those big shoulders, that's why. So when you were a kid and you were pestering these handlers, what were some of the questions you were asking them?
A lot of it was presentation in certain breeds. When I worked for Bobby Stebbins, he was great at this. We'd do our schedule up, and whenever he saw a break in the schedule, he would look to see what were happening, what breeds were being shown during our break. And he would make me go watch Gene Blake show an Afghan, or George show the Irish setter, or he made me go he would pick out these handlers and he made me go watch them. And I'm telling you, you learn so much by choosing these people and watching them and see what they do. And like Janie, if you watch, I didn't get to see Janie's show a lot because I was pretty young, but it's like every move was choreographed. She knew exactly what she was doing every time. And it's exciting to watch when you see a handler do that. It's not, and it wasn't choreographed. It came naturally to her, but it just seemed that way. Everything was so smooth and there was no panic in her. And I'm sure no matter who we are, we do panic at some point. And there's an adrenaline story about, when your adrenaline spikes and you become this superhuman strength person, and then you start doing things too fast. And George, again, I'm going to talk about George. George does all this stuff in my head. He banged it all in my head when I was a kid. He told me that when your adrenaline spikes, it takes 3 seconds for it to come out your breath, and your dog smells it. And he says that dogs don't sense when you're nervous, they smell it. And he would always try to tell me to mask my breath with a candy. And even to this day, before I go in the ring, we have these cough candies in Canada called Fisherman's Friends. I'm not sure if you have them down there, but they're disgusting. And I always have them in my pocket. People make fun of me because I always have them in my pocket. And I always take one before I show a dog. I do. It's just become a habit for me. And I hear George yelling at me if I don't do it. So.
Well, it's good to hear, again, that even someone such as yourself can still get nervous and have an adrenaline.
I think when you don't get nervous, you don't have that edge. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's about being able to channel all of that.
Right.
I do want to encourage juniors, please put some questions in the chat box. Will is an all breed handler. He knows everything about so many different types of breeds. So if you have some questions, please put them up in the chat box and I will ask him. And if you want to, wait to the end to ask him yourself, that's fine too. But it's a great opportunity for you to be asking your own questions. Will, if you were judging junior showmanship, what would you be looking for in the ring?
Well, I do judge it up here. Down there, you have to be licensed, but up here, we're allowed to. The show just asks the judge ahead of time, and it's usually a handler. And I like to see someone working hard with the dog, but I also like to see the. I don't want to notice the handler as much. I want to see a good job, but I want to see the handler almost disappear behind their dog without making a mistake. I was taught that from Garrett. I was taught because when I was younger, I was a bit of a ham, and I would try to you get in there and your ego takes over and you think you have to do things. But Garrett would tell me no. He'd say, "Ham it up, William, ham it up," and I knew I knew exactly what he was saying to me to tell me to stop doing what I was doing. So, and I just find that if you think about almost disappearing behind the dog, your moves become smoother. Everything becomes smoother. You're not worrying about the crowd as much. You're just worrying about the animal you're trying to present. And like I said, anybody can show a dog. It takes a great talent to present a dog, and you have to learn how to present a dog. And that's melding with the dog and becoming one with the dog, moving in timing with the dog. Everything's got to become, but it's about the dog. So you need to work with the dog. I like handlers that ask their dogs to do things, not tell them to do things. So I can see that when I'm judging juniors.
Yeah, there's a big difference in that.
There sure is, yeah.
And there is a time to tell them, but yes, it's amazing the handlers that their first step is always to ask and to request, and there's a difference in how those dogs present themselves.
Now there's some dogs that I've had some dogs that I've shown that it's been strictly business between them and I, and we've had to work that way. But then I have other dogs that have become my best friends that sometimes took advantage of me out there because we were best friends. So it's a fine line sometimes.
So you mentioned that you like to look for a handler that melds with the dog. How do you meld with the dog?
Well, I just try my best to work off the dog. I try to, if the dog has certain habits, I try to work with those habits instead of trying to work against them. I remember a young handler in Canada. He had a very nice dog that he got from an American kennel. The dog had already won some best in shows down in America, and he was trying to change the dog. And he came out of the ring one day. He was so angry, and he said, "I got to retrain this dog." And I said, "No, he needs to retrain you, because he knows exactly what he's doing, and you're working against him." So, and he'll never admit it to this day, but things changed that day. He started winning, and I could see he wasn't forcing the dog into doing things, and the dog just performed himself. It seems like they do. Dogs all need a lot of there's guidance involved and direction, but if it looks easy, it's usually because the dog is being directed the right way and guided the right way without being forced. Like I've had some dogs where judges told me, "Oh, anybody could show this dog," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, take him and find out." But it's just because we had that connection, and I knew what to expect from them and what they were going to do in certain situations and how they were going to handle this part of the crowd or how they're going to handle the examination. It's all these little things I think you need to learn about your dog, about each dog you're showing. It's working with the dog, not working against the dog.
Yeah, that's great advice for sure. Annie has a question. How did you decide to pursue showing dogs versus going to college? Was that a difficult decision for you?
Well, I did try college for a while, but the dog shows just got in the way. And I had this one dog that I was doing quite well with as a youngster, and my parents helped pay for that dog's career and called it my tuition. And it really did work out well because I learned so much from that dog. And I just always wanted to be a handler. There was nothing really else I wanted to do. So it was hard to try to move my direction somewhere else when I was always being drawn back to the dogs.
Well, I think it's a great question and a very personal decision.
It really is. Like I would tell my kids, I have two boys, and I would say, school first, yeah, something to fall back on. And I think I learned a lot of in life school. I have my own shampoo company, and I've written a couple of books, and I've got my online stuff, and so I think I've learned from people I've been around. So I think because of our world and the dog show, we have so much access to different individuals who do everything that you learn from all these individuals. It's amazing who is at the dog show, from politicians to lawyers to teachers to doctors. You can learn anything you want from talking to these people. And I think I was one of those people that just continuously ask questions all the time.
Well, I will say from my perspective, I did pursue my degree, and I did want to have that to fall back on. And of course, that was the line of logic when I grew up.
Oh, it's good logic.
But I can see both perspectives. And one thing I will say is, being a professional dog handler, I actually feel I could be a CEO of any company. The skills that, if you're good at what you do, you're a psychologist. Not only do you know how to psychologically work with a dog, you learn to work with all different types of personalities of people. It's part of your job. You learn how to fix your vehicle when it breaks down. You learn how to, you are a jack of all trades in many ways, and very self-reliant. So there are so many life lessons that come with being a dog show handler. That's why you retired, Will, and here you are. You're promoting products, and which I'd love to hear a little bit more about as well, as what you're doing after, because I think one of the things that does come up, and Tuni Conti is someone that I interviewed as well, and she said, absolutely, you go to college, you could get injured, this is a very physical job, you have to have that college education, which I agree with. But as I see with you, Will, you have this, this is like phase 2, and here you are making a career where you're not handling dogs, and you're doing it without a college education. So
dogs were definitely a stepping stone, though, for everything I've done. So it's worked hand in hand. I think it was just I hate to say it, dogs just kept pulling me back in everything I do. Everything I do is somehow directly or indirectly because of dogs. I've been
Can you tell us a little bit about the programs that you have? Some of my juniors have checked out your virtual videos, and you have schools. Can you tell me a little bit about what you have to offer that maybe could appeal to some of the juniors?
Sure. I have a YouTube channel called Dog Show Tips. And right now I'm doing a lot of interviewing, but I also do a lot of lessons on that. And I've done, I think right now there's about 5 or 6 lessons on YouTube where I've broken different aspects of the sport down, from the free stack to the hard stack to moving your dog to tabling your dog. I've also done a bunch of grooming seminar webinars. I have a line of shampoo and conditioners out there. I wrote a book in 2013. I wrote a book called For the Love of Dogs. And it was just a story about a young person's pursuit in the sport of dogs. And it went well up here. And it seems to go well in Europe too. I think there's some Irish setter clubs and whatnot that promote it as well. I wrote that. I got the idea driving to Chicago International because we were talking amongst ourselves that there was not enough young people in our sport. So I thought, I'm going to write this book about this young person that gets involved in the sport. And it was a lot of fun. Done a lot of articles. I just tried to do everything I could educational wise, besides the obviously the shampoo and conditioners, but all my webinars and seminars. I do seminars. I haven't been doing them because of COVID, but I for a while there, I was booked 2 and 3 a month across Canada and the States. And it was very busy. That was going to be what I was going to do when I retire. But then when COVID came along, we've had to find something else to do. And a buddy of mine that has been helping me with dog show tips for about 10 or 15 years, we decided to start dog show tips with the interviews and the nonsensical ones, plus all the webinars that we did. We did a 3-part webinar on showing dogs, and that went over very well. We tend to run that every 6 months. And I also have different breed webinars, an individual webinar. I've also done where people have sent me videos of themselves showing their dogs, and I will critique it and tell them what I think they should do and how to improve it, in my opinion. I get a lot of Europeans from that. It's a lot of fun. It's very gratifying too. And I look down at my phone and there's a number there that is like way too long to be a North American number. And they thank me because they finished their boxer and they had never been to one class, but they learned through virtual. So, and it's fun. I like hearing those things. I love hearing when someone succeeds and I've helped them along the way somewhere.
Yeah, that's great. It's I think it's great to have all this virtual and even the interviews that you're doing that can give juniors or people new to this access to some of these great people that have come along and hear their stories.
I was so worried about losing some of those stories, and we did lose some of those stories. So actually it was Eileen Hackett and Kate that told me I should do this years ago. They want me to write a book, but I think this worked out better. I think because I think you need to hear them. You need to hear these people's voices when they speak. Like I have known so many of them for so long, and I'm dumbfounded what they tell me and what I've learned. Like I've learned so much interviewing them. It's been fabulous.
That's a lot of fun. What would you recommend to people that are new to learning how to show dogs?
Well, what would I recommend?
To a new person.
How to begin? Well, I tell everybody that go to a dog show is the first step for me before all this online stuff came on. I would tell them to go to a dog show and just sit and watch and see if it was actually for you, because it's a microcosm of the real world in that dog show. And some people are overwhelmed by it, and some people are sucked right in right away when they see it. They just love the atmosphere. And again, I think when you're there, you decide if you have a breed you're interested in, you start watching that breed and you'll start seeing who dominates that breed. And that's the person you want to go talk to, because you don't want to start, I don't want to say this, I don't want to come out the wrong way. You don't want to start at the bottom or in the middle. You want to learn from the best people you can possibly learn from, even when you're brand new. Now, obviously baby steps, because you are green walking in there. But again, that's how I wrote. I wrote this small handling guide called "Handle Your Way to a Paper Bag," and it was the first one was learning your breed, but the second one was standing on the shoulders of giants, and that was choosing your mentor. And I think that's the most important part. I really do.
Yeah, I think that's a really great message. Is there anything else you would like to add? Any questions that I haven't asked? Because I will open this up to the juniors in just a minute. Any thoughts, Will?
Oh, myself. I'm sorry. Well, I think that the sport needs you young people to be interested and have initiative to move on, because we're only as strong as our new people. So you new people have to. I think it's great that you want to be involved in the sport of dogs and learn what you can and be a sponge. Learn to be a sponge. And I remember when I first started working for a handler, I'm sure it is unheard of nowadays, but I did it for free. I just wanted to go to the shows and work, and I wanted to learn. And it was that kind of initiative. Adam was the same way. Adam was just like a sponge. And that makes it, as a handler and a teacher, students like that make it seem all worthwhile. I remember my very favorite garden. This is even including the one we won. My very favorite garden was the year Adam won the sporting group with the Irish setter. Jody Paquette went third with her standard schnauzer. Jennifer McClintock went fourth with their Old English sheepdog. And Marlene Ness won Cockers that year over the black dog that Michael was showing, those top dog all breed. and by him I hate to say it, by Marlene winning that variety, it opened the door to Adam winning the sporting group, and all those kids worked for me. So I was like in heaven watching that weekend. So it was so much fun watching all these kids just succeed, you know.
That is such a good feeling. I've found, as I've interviewed my book, what motivates certain handlers, it can be very different what motivates them. And for me, I love taking a raw dog and a dog that has some challenges and really watching it step into its best self and things that maybe I didn't even think it could overcome, being able to see that dog overcome that. And in many ways, you with these kids, I mean, you saw them when they were yet raw and young and not developed, and wow, what a feeling to see them
still
standing.
Fun. I still love following them even to this day. I love watching them, and I do follow them. So
that is great. I was talking with Sue Forsythe because I'm interviewing her to talk about Jane in my book. And she was talking about Jane and how much she would ride her help. She wanted them to be so much better because she wanted someone to compete against her. So she wanted them stronger because she wanted them to be better competitors, because then she'd have to fight harder. Oh my and God. I thought that was,
oh my gosh,
just so much, fun. I mean, there are people that just like to win, and then there are people that just really enjoy the competing and what that brings out in you.
And Janie, whenever I saw her, she always tried to teach me something. I don't know. It was, if I was doing something wrong, she taught me that I was doing it wrong. If I was doing something right, she never would tell you, but she would pat you on the back a little bit. But those people are far and few between. She was an amazing competitor. I loved watching her show dogs. I remember watching her and George show Irish setters one year, and I was captivated watching the two of them work out there. And George had worked for Janie a bit, so it was interesting watching them work together. So.
Yeah, that would be amazing too.
There's a story. I was in the ring one time with Adam, and we were at some Irish Setter specialty, and I was either behind him or ahead of him. I can't remember. We were not close enough that we could chat. And he said, I can't show dogs when you're here because I can't do all my moves. I said, because they're my moves.
So, Will, can you tell us some of the breeds that you show? I have juniors that show several different breeds. We know that you specialize. Setters are really where you got your start, correct? But what are some of the other breeds that you?
I've won best in shows in every group. I love showing standard poodles. I showed those for Linda Campbell for years, and Alston and I were together. We ran the whole kennel for Darwin Kennels, and that was a lot of fun. I love showing poodles. I love showing French bulldogs. I showed a lot of Cavaliers and Griffs. Terriers weren't as strong in Canada, but I did show a lot of Airedales and later on Border Terriers. And I loved showing the Airedales. There's another person when I first got my first Airedale, I bugged Bobby Fisher until he finally answered my questions. So, and he was great that way too. And he didn't know me from anybody, and he still answered my questions. I was just this young kid that kept bugging him. Working dogs, I showed a lot of boxers and I showed herding dogs. Bouviers was what I showed mostly, Bouviers and sheepdogs in the herding group. In the working group was mostly boxers. I showed a lot of boxers. Hound Group, Beagles and Afghans were my main two breeds. It was Top Dog got breed in 2010 with an Afghan dog, and he was so smart. He was like a person. It was so much fun to have him around. And then sporting dogs is my main. A lot of setters, a lot of spaniels. I grew up with Irish setters and English Cocker spaniels, so. I consider myself a sporting dog handler first.
Well, for sure. If kids have any questions when it comes to grooming, I'm hearing poodles and Afghans. So I think you're pretty well qualified if any grooming questions come up. I have Amanda here. Just wanted to know if you've ever shown a Saluki.
Yep, I showed for Star White up here. I showed a bitch named Lucky, and she won it. She was top. no, number 2 hound up here. I love showing Salukis. And I used to get in trouble when I first started showing Salukis because I showed them a little too sporting dog-like, and I maybe moved them a little too fast, but I figured it out. So I watched Gene Blake enough, and I figured it out.
It's fun though, you know, figuring out a new breed and trying to.
God, yeah. And I always try to find who I think is the best at that breed and go watch them and then see how they do it, what little nuances they have, and what. It's amazing to watch them work. If someone that's a master at their craft, it's so fun to watch them work. You know, I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Even now, I love to sit back and watch a good battle. Remember, I watched boxers a couple years ago at Orlando, and Michael was showing his bitch then. I guess she was relatively new, and it was almost like he just turned it on, and everybody else turned. It was just so fun to watch them all battle back and forth. And he wasn't going to be denied that day. And when he came in the ring, I'm like, Mikey, that was exciting. You know, it's fun to watch that.
So. I actually do feel a little disappointed for some of the juniors coming up nowadays because the way the shows have developed, you don't have a concentration of outstanding handlers in a breed. Right. Because, you know, most of us, you know, if I'm campaigning a top Doberman, then another top Doberman handler isn't going to want to come show against me because they want to go somewhere else. But being able to see those top handlers, like you said, in boxers, and you have not 1 or 2, but you have 6 or 7 or 8 of them all in the ring at the same time, like duking it out. Oh, it's
so much fun. We had a very famous boxer handler up here in the 60s and 70s. Named Shirley DeBoer. I don't know if you remember that name. She was top dog all breed 2 years in a row with a boxer up here. Well, one year, Jeannie was telling me the story. I didn't get to see it, but she said one of her most exciting years in the garden, it came down to her and Shirley, because she said her and Shirley showed so similarly that the battle was back and forth. They would play off each other. She said it was so much fun competing with Shirley. Shirley passed away since then, so but it was fun to watch. I never got to see Shirley show that much, but Janie always told me how good she was. You know,
that's great, and I hope that these, you know, juniors being our future can hear this message of the camaraderie and how you can love showing against each other, and you know, nobody likes to lose.
Exactly. There has to be that respect, and there has to be that camaraderie. And it'll be so much more fun if you have it. Trust me.
Yep, I remember Toonie was saying in one of her interviews that Michelle Scott said, "Hey, if you won all the time, it wouldn't be that much fun now, would it? You'd get old." So I don't know. Some people do seem like they could just keep winning all the time, and it doesn't get.
Oh yeah, and it seems like they are, but they're not really.
Yeah, we all like to, you know, to challenge like that. Yeah. And I have a couple. We have to. The juniors just have a couple questions about breeds. Have you shown Brittany's and Weimaraners?
Yeah, I've shown both, not extensively. I had a couple of Brittany clients, couple of Weimaraner clients up here, and I enjoyed showing them. Weimaraners are a breed I think you have to almost let them do their own thing, but they still need your guidance because they need your support. And I think that you need to be with them. Brittany's, well, a Brittany, if you get a really good show dog Brittany, you can go on forever. They just seem to enjoy it a lot. There's certain breeds that just enjoy it. Like Irish setter males, doesn't matter what's happening. You give them a smack on the butt and away they go. They're just thrilled. Now the girls, on the other hand, they think too much and they make you work. But the Irish setter boys, I guess I find that with the boxers too. I don't know if you find that with the Dobermans, but the boxer girls, it's almost like you've got to talk them into it, where the boys are like, okay.
No, I get a whole lot of things with boxers, but I show a lot of boxers myself, and the temperaments seem to be a challenge as of late. But that's not just boxers. I see that.
Sure. I showed for one boxer kennel basically, so I got to know what to expect. And the girls were all princesses, and the boys were all just dumb boys.
Yeah. So how about, I have Annie wants to know if you've shown an Icelandic sheepdog.
Icelandic sheepdog? I can't say that I have. My really good buddy, Doug Belter, shows them all the time, but I don't think I've ever shown an Icelandic sheepdog.
I've got a couple of juniors that have some of the rare breeds and a wire-haired Vizsla.
Yeah, we have those up here. I've never shown one either, though. We have a couple breeders up here that do very well with them. They look, the one dog that was up here, he did very well. He looked like he was a fun dog to show. I don't think they're much like the smooths, though, in temperament. I think they're a little more, they seem a little more grounded than the smooths as far as when I watch them.
I have a question here from Elliot. And Elliot says that he has a standard Schnauzer puppy who is getting ready for his first show. And he wants to know how to prepare him when he shows him alone, because of when he's alone, he does perfect. But the moment he sees a person, he gets so excited and cannot stand still.
Yeah, a lot of that, I see that a lot. And a lot of the times, because they have this behavior, we anticipate it. So we tend to promote it for them. They know that you're expecting it. I think you need to slow things down. Like George said, work in half speed and just do things in a slow motion manner with that dog. And it's got to become a structured thing for him, because he's gets himself so excited when he sees other dogs or other people, and he feels your reaction. So I just think you've got to learn to work through it and work things slow, one thing at a time. Even I tell people with new dogs in my classes, if you get 2 legs right tonight, I'll be really happy, So sometimes that's the case with these dogs, but a lot of the times it's how they react to you. They know that you're expecting it, and they pent up. It becomes, the two of you are becoming one, but almost in the wrong way, because he's feeling what you're feeling, because you're getting anxious for that moment to happen. And I see it a lot of times when dogs have bad experiences in the ring, like say they have a bad experience with a judge looking in their mouth. Well, then that handler expects that every time, and he starts to anticipate it. You've almost got to blank that slate every time you walk in the ring, so that you don't overreact and cause that dog to do those things. Sorry, go ahead.
And I will say as well, as someone who's won many best in shows, me personally, there's nothing more nerve-wracking than walking in the ring with that 6-month-old puppy that you have spent all this time training, and you just want this perfect performance. And so that when you create this expectation, it doesn't help. So all I'm trying to say is, Elliot, I completely understand how you have been practicing and everything is so perfect. But one of the big things that I always tell myself is let's just get this one behind us. And I try to just let some of that pressure go, have the expectation that he's a puppy and he's probably is going to want to greet that judge, and that's okay. In time, he will settle down. And I think the more that you can just allow for the fact that he's a puppy, he's going to be excited. And if it were me personally, and I was guiding him through that experience, I would want to be very calm. And when it was all over, I would probably want to very calmly let him know that was okay. So even if he moved, he did a bunch of that was okay. It wasn't amazing, but we'll say that was okay. That was a start. You were excited, and that's okay. It's a good first step. So being able to maybe rein back your expectations for what you expect of him, and know that he's a puppy, and he probably will move, and if he does, it's okay. You guys will get there.
Right. Exactly.
That's where we start.